1 o'clock in the morning, Thursday, the 29th of July, 1954. In the rear garden of a house in Hampstead, London, something is burning. Across the garden wall, a neighbour stops, looks, cannot yet name what he is seeing. 1 mile away, a telephone rings in a police station. Two worlds are about to collide, and only one of them will survive the night. Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. Hampstead in the summer of 1954 was a place that had learned to feel ordinary again. The war had been over for 9 years. The rationing of certain goods had only recently ended. The streets of North London, brick terraces, iron railings, the particular green of a well-kept English garden, had reassembled themselves into the appearance of permanence, of lives proceeding without interruption. On Hale Lane, a family of 5 occupied a house that was, by every outward measure, unremarkable. 3 children, a husband who worked long hours and was liked by those who employed him. A wife who kept the rooms with quiet, determined care. They had built this life over a decade of effort. It was modest, and it was theirs. Then, in July of 1953, an older woman arrived from Cyprus. She spoke very little English. She found almost nothing in the household to her satisfaction, and she had no intention of leaving. 2 worlds had entered the same 4 walls. They could not both remain. By 1 o'clock on the morning of the 29th of July, 1954, the question of which world would endure had already been settled, in the most final manner available. This is the story of 2 worlds that could not coexist, and of the woman who stood between them. Her name, before marriage, was Hella Bleicher. She was German by birth, precise by temperament, and practical in everything she undertook. The exact year of her birth is not recorded in the sources available, but she was 36 years of age at the time of her death in 1954. She had come to London as a working woman. She found employment in the dress department of a clothing establishment near Piccadilly, a position that demanded attention, an eye for detail, and the ability to manage customers with composure. She possessed all 3 qualities in sufficient measure to be regarded as a reliable member of staff. It was in this period of her London life that she encountered Stavros Christofi. He was Cypriot. He had arrived in England in 1941 and found work as a waiter at the Café de Paris, a well-regarded establishment in the West End. He had learned English. He worked hard. He was well liked. They met. They married. They moved, with the deliberate, incremental effort of 2 people who understood the value of what they were building, to Hampstead, to Hale Lane, to a house with a garden and enough rooms for the family they intended to raise. 3 children were born. Hella furnished the house. She chose the curtains, the arrangement of the rooms, the order of the daily routine. She decided how the children were fed, schooled, and managed. These were not small decisions. They were the architecture of a life, and she had constructed them with care. She was a good mother. Those who knew her said so plainly. She was not a woman who drew attention to herself or sought admiration. She worked. She managed. She kept the household in the condition she believed it deserved. In the summer of 1953, her mother-in-law arrived from Cyprus. Styllou Christofi had not seen her son for 12 years. The family welcomed her. Hella opened the door of her home and offered the older woman a place within it. It was, by all accounts, a generous offer. It was not received as one. Jumps forward to the official response. Officers, evidence, first reports. Hella is present only as measurements, photographs, and witness statements. The clinical world reduces a life to facts. The report filed by the officers who attended Hale Lane in the early hours of the 29th of July, 1954, recorded the following. Time of arrival: approximately 1 o'clock in the morning. The fire brigade had already been summoned. The fire in the rear garden had been extinguished before officers reached the scene. The children, 3 in number, aged between 4 and 9 years, were found asleep in their rooms. They were unharmed. In the rear garden, the partly burned body of a woman was recovered. She was identified as Hella Christofi, age 36, wife of Stavros Christofi, resident at the address. A mark was clearly visible around the neck of the deceased. Officers noted it immediately. It was continuous. It was deep. It was consistent, the examining physician would later confirm, with strangulation by ligature. The house was searched in sequence. In the kitchen, traces of blood on the floor. Evidence of a body having been dragged across the surface. In the bedroom of the accused, a wedding ring, wrapped in paper, later confirmed as belonging to the deceased. On the shoes of the accused, blood. Paraffin. The accused, Styllou Christofi, mother-in-law of the deceased, age approximately 54, was present at the scene. She had, in the minutes before officers arrived, run into the street and stopped a passing motor car. She had communicated, in her limited English, that there was a fire, that children were sleeping, that help was required. Her account, when formally taken by officers, was recorded verbatim. She stated that she had been asleep, that she had been woken by the sound of male voices below, that she had gone downstairs, that she had seen a man in the garden before returning upstairs to check on her daughter-in-law, that finding the bedroom door unanswered, she had gone back to the garden and discovered the body already burning, that she had attempted to fetch water. No male visitor was found. No evidence of forced entry was established. No neighbour or passer-by had observed any stranger at the property. The official world recorded all of this without comment. Evidence does not comment. It accumulates. Returns to Hella, the months before the crime, the escalating tension, what she experienced and decided. Ends at the last confirmed evidence of her life. The 12 months between July of 1953 and July of 1954 were not easy ones for Hella Christofi. The difficulty did not announce itself all at once. It accumulated. Styllou Christofi found fault with the house, with the furnishings, with the manner in which the children were raised, with the food, with the order of the rooms that her daughter-in-law had arranged over years of careful effort. She found fault, above all, with the fact of the life her son had built, that he had chosen England over Cyprus, chosen this woman and these children and this house on Hale Lane over the island he had left behind. None of this expressed itself quietly. Neighbours on Hale Lane were aware that arguments occurred within the household. They were not infrequent. Hella absorbed it for 12 months. She was not a woman who surrendered easily to difficulty. She had come to London alone. She had built a household from the beginning. She was not accustomed to giving ground. But 12 months had a limit. By the spring of 1954, Hella had made a decision. She told her husband plainly. She was going to take the children to Germany for a visit. When she returned, she expected his mother to have made arrangements to return to Cyprus. The situation as it stood could not continue. It was a practical decision, made in the manner she made all her decisions, directly, without drama, with a clear view of what needed to happen next. Styllou Christofi had no intention of returning to Cyprus. She had been living in London for 12 months. She did not want to leave. What occurred in the interior of those two women's minds in the weeks before the 28th of July 1954 is not recorded. What the record shows is only the last entry in Hella's side of the account. On the evening of Wednesday the 28th of July, she put her children to bed. She closed the bathroom door behind her. That was the last moment in which she was simply a woman, in her own house, going about the business of a summer evening. The post-mortem examination of Hella Christofi established the following. Death had not been caused by fire. The burns to the body were post-mortem, applied after death had already occurred. The fire in the garden was not the act of killing, it was the attempt to conceal it. The cause of death was strangulation by ligature. The instrument, identified as a scarf, had been applied with sustained and considerable force. The forensic report noted that the pressure exerted had been sufficient to cause the material of the scarf to penetrate the surface of the skin. This finding carried a specific significance at trial. Strangulation of this nature does not occur in an instant. It requires duration. It requires intent maintained over time. The blow delivered before strangulation, traced by the prosecution to a heavy metal tray removed from beneath the kitchen stove, had rendered the deceased insensible but had not killed her. She had been rendered unconscious. Then she had been dragged. Then she had been strangled. Then the ring had been removed. Then the body had been taken to the garden. Each of these acts was distinct. Each required a decision. The forensic evidence did not support, could not support, any account of impulsive or unpremeditated action. Blood on the kitchen floor, drag marks across its surface, blood and paraffin on the shoes of the accused, a concealed ring. The sequence was complete, and it was consistent throughout. When the two worlds, the world of Hella Christofi, arranging her plans for Germany, managing her household, deciding what came next, and the world of the official investigation, its photographs and measurements and clinical reports, were placed side by side. The distance between them was exactly the length of one summer night. If you are finding this case as compelling as we are, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. It truly helps us continue researching and sharing these forgotten stories from history. We also read every comment, so let us know your thoughts on this case below.
Now, let's continue. Styllou Christofi was arrested at the scene. She did not resist. Her account was taken, recorded, and found irreconcilable with the physical evidence at every point. She was remanded into the custody of Holloway Prison on the 30th of July, 1954. Following the completion of the post-mortem examination, she was formally charged with the willful murder of Hella Christofi. Prosecution brings the official world. Defense brings the human world. The verdict is where both reach their conclusion. The Central Criminal Court, the Old Bailey, London, the 25th of October, 1954. The prosecution entered the courtroom carrying the official world entire. The forensic report, the photographs, the catalogued evidence, the witness statements of the neighbour who had seen the fire, the officers who had searched the house, the physician who had examined the body. They arranged this world before the jury with methodical precision. The post-mortem findings, the drag marks, the blood on the shoes, the ring in the bedroom. They placed one further element before the court, the sequence of accounts offered by the accused. First, that she had been asleep. Then, that a man had been in the garden. The progression of those accounts, each version produced only when the previous one had been weighed against the evidence and found insufficient, was presented as itself a form of testimony. What a person claims, and then claims again differently, tells its own story. The defense entered carrying the human world, a woman of 54, illiterate, from a poor Cypriot village, who had arrived in a foreign country where she could not read a street sign or understand a conversation in a shop. A woman dislocated from everything she knew. A woman who, the defense argued, had not been fully in possession of her rational faculties. Dr. T. Christie, the principal medical officer at Holloway Prison, gave evidence. He had observed the accused since the 30th of July. He had concluded that she suffered from a delusional disorder, a fixed and irrational conviction that her grandchildren were being raised incorrectly, that her daughter-in-law would eventually exclude her from their lives entirely. He found her fit to plead. But the disorder, he stated, was real. Styllou Christofi had been advised by her son and her legal representatives to plead insanity. She refused. She was, she said, a poor woman of no education. She was not a mad woman. The jury of 10 men and 2 women deliberated for just under 2 hours. Styllou Christofi was found guilty of the willful murder of Hella Christofi. She was sentenced to death by hanging. She showed no emotion when the verdict was read. The 2 worlds had reached their conclusion. Only one had survived the courtroom, as only one had survived the night. What remained of the victim's world after the verdict? What changed in the official world? And in the gap between them, neither world, but the silence where both once existed. What remained of Hella Christofi's world after the verdict was this: 3 children, a house on Hale Lane, and a husband who had lost both his wife and his mother within the space of 5 months. The children grew. The house continued. What was carried forward from that summer, what the children understood in their different ways, at their different ages, of what had occurred in their home, the records do not preserve in any detail that is available. Stavros Christofi, who had advised his mother to plead insanity and seen her refuse, was left to raise 3 children in the house where their mother had died. He had come to London 13 years before with nothing but the willingness to work. He had built a life of genuine substance. He had lost it, in a single night, to a collision he had not foreseen and could not have prevented. What remained of the official world after the verdict was a legal process that continued for several weeks beyond the jury's decision. Under the Criminal Lunatics Act of 1884, the Home Secretary was obliged to commission a psychiatric assessment of any condemned prisoner before execution was carried out. The psychiatrists who examined Styllou Christofi after the verdict reached a different conclusion from Dr. Christie's. They found no mental abnormality of a degree that would justify a recommendation for reprieve. On the 12th of December 1954, it was announced that no reprieve would be granted. 6 Labour members of Parliament raised the matter in debate. One observed that a woman who refused to plead insanity when it might have saved her life could not be said to be entirely of sound mind. The argument was noted. It was not acted upon. On the 13th of December 1954, Styllou Christofi was executed by hanging at Holloway Prison. She was the last foreign woman ever hanged in Britain. She was the second to last woman hanged in Britain at all. There was very little press coverage. There was no crowd outside the prison gates. She had come from Cyprus with the conviction that her place was beside her son and her grandchildren, that she belonged in the life he had built, even though that life had been built without her and had not been designed to accommodate her. She had held that conviction so absolutely that she had refused every accommodation offered to her, including the one that might have kept her alive. And Hella Christofi, who had furnished the rooms, raised the children, made the plans, stood in the bathroom doorway at the end of a summer evening, exists now only in the gap between these 2 worlds. Not in the official record, which named her as a victim and then moved on. Not in the domestic world, which continued without her. In the gap, where the 2 worlds never quite meet, that is where she remains.